Greetings, travelers.
Greetings, travelers. It is Mark and Erika of the Eerie Travels crew.
Yes, mythical march is continuing.
Yes.
So it marches on.
I can't believe you just said that, but I'm going to
Hey,
let it go.
well, we're recording this on my favorite day of the year that's actually a command, March 4th.
Oh,
So the only day of the year that's a command.
I didn't
So
even think about that, actually, but that's good to know.
yeah, but just got back from Frogman Festival.
How was that?
It was
I didn't get
amazing.
to go.
I met a few of our travelers, and we made some new friends as well. A lot of our favorite vendors were there, so we got to talk spooky vending. Adulting Axolotl was there, and I finally got to give them their Eerie Travelers shirts that they've been wanting from day one. I got a couple shirts from them. I got to talk to Ashley from On Wednesdays We Would Talk Weird. We got to talk to Hometown Haunts. We got to talk to Cryptids of the Corn, Creepy Acres, This Week in Creepy History. So we got to talk to lots of podcasts. At some point, we will be doing a cross promotions where we do their episodes and they do our episodes. It'll be a lot of fun.
Oh, that's super exciting. We love our podcasting community.
Yes, and got to be finally on a Jacob the Carpetbagger videos. I've been adjacent to him because I've done a lot of stuff with Tampa J, Chris the Girl, Adam the Woo, all the big YouTubers, and Jacob was actually at last year's Mothman, but didn't come down our aisle. He went down the aisle next to us. So this is the first time we actually got him on, to meet us on camera and stuff. So it was very nice.
That's awesome.
And we have a few new listeners from that. So thank you all for joining and hope you keep up with us. More travels ahead.
Sorry I missed everybody at Frogman. I will be at Georgia Bigfoot, which I think is our next one.
Yeah, in just a couple weeks.
Yeah, so we'll be at Georgia Bigfoot.
Or 16th. So right after St. Patty's Day. So chase all the snakes away and then come join us for Bigfoot.
St. Patrick's Day is the 17th, but I'm letting
Oh,
it go. You
well,
are
whatever.
so
All right,
pretty
we'll be
today,
there before
Mark.
the snake. So we'll be there before the snakes. So great.
You are just a beautiful monstrosity of a human being. But with that, we have a special guest today who's one of our Eerie Travels regulars who came up with a brilliant idea for an episode. Mainly, she has all these nerdy things that she likes to talk about. So without further ado, we have the amazing Valerie Willis, who's going to talk to us about Bloody Mary, which some people know, and Fiery Mary, which I have no idea what that is, but we'll do both. So welcome back, Val.
Yeah. I'm going to talk about all the Bloody Marys. That's what it technically is. I'm taking you guys on an adventure from the past to the present and all places from Scandinavia all the way to close to home. So I hope you guys are ready for this.
And welcome back, Val. I mean,
I know.
I just saw you at Pensacon, but it's good to have you back on the show. So
definitely. It was fun at Pensacon, and I got a bar of soap from Amy. It was release your inner rigoroo, which was appropriate. And talking
about Adulting Axolotl has asked me again to remind everyone that Bigfoot incest is a thing. And he hopes that we keep bringing it up on more and more episodes. So I forgot that.
Wow. You know what I love about this, Mark, is I don't even have to bring this up anymore. The first time I said it, everybody freaked the frack out. But now you keep bringing it up. Bigfoot incest rock band.
Yeah, but I was just thinking, Val made that awesome logo that got us banned from Facebook for 4 days. So yeah. that was great.
So sorry.
So we got to come up with
it, or was it that I caught an STC on Eerie Travels?
Yep.
Oh my God, craziness. Okay, so I'm assuming that we are going to go into the Wayback Machine. That is
we're going in the Wayback Machine. We're going back to Slavic tribes in just before right around the time, let's say that the Romans were starting to Christianize and saintanize a lot of other tribes' gods. Like, hey, we have a god similar to that, so let's make this Saint Elijah and Saint so-and-so. And that's where we get the story of Fiery Mary and the Dog Days of Summer. Mm-hmm. Now, the original tale, it's near impossible without traveling there, I guess, and seeing some more of the local museums to find out more. But in short, it's almost similar to ancient Greek mythology. You have two brothers. One is basically Zeus-like and one is Hades-like. But imagine if Demeter was their sister and kept the boys in check. It's a very interesting aspect. So she was a fire goddess, and her role was is that the two brothers, the one of spring and summer and the one of fall and winter, the underground and the above ground, right? Sun and darkness, light and darkness, that kind of thing going on. They shared a bride. And she was the one responsible for making sure the bride exchanged hands when it was supposed to happen. So the brother of light and things like that always.
Okay, wait a minute, because I may be the only one who's lost. So we're talking
Okay.
about Zeus and who?
Hades.
Zeus
They're-
and Hades.
They're the Slavic
Yeah.
equivalents.
So let's go with what they're labeled in most of the tales, which is Saint Elijah, who is like a thunder god.
Okay.
Fiery Mary, who is the sister who walks the earth, and then the devil is usually how it's depicted, because you can find,
Maria is the only one I can pronounce. I can't pronounce.
yes, and you always see her in medieval images holding a black hammer and beating like a little devil child thing in her hands or on the ground or someplace, right? And she always usually is wearing a red cloak.
And it's is it Perun is the thunder god?
Yeah, there's a couple of different names, and it's because it's been
There's so many different dialects there too.
dialect.
I learned very quickly when I went from basically just like traveling Appalachia, you go from one holler to the next. It's a completely different language, and they're speaking the same words, but it's a completely different soundings.
Right, and it's crazy. So in short, during the hottest days of July, right? 29th, 30th, and 31st, it's hot. And this is the week of Saint Elijah's birthday, and when he receives his bride back from the devil, basically. So some of the things that happened during this week of celebration leading up to his birthday, which I believe is August 2nd, if I remember right, is that you're not supposed to work. You're not supposed to be in the fields or farming. They say even for a woman, you're not to sew or mend anything. Like, you're to feast, relax, and take a break.
Nothing that might cause a fire. That's the
big... Right. Because now we're in a drought season and on the verge of thunderstorms, right? So that's sort of what this portrays, is the seasonal dangers that happen. No one having heat stroke, no lightning, but it's believed that if your fields were set afire or your house was set afire, it was because you were caught doing something you weren't supposed to do. And if you're out walking, that you should be wary of snakes. So this is where you can tie in the whole, March of Dimes and things like that. And basically the snake was believed to be the devil, and he would try to hide in your shadow. And if you're caught by Fiery Mary walking around or doing things you're not supposed to do, she'd take a sledgehammer to you.
Yep.
Because she thought you were the brother trying to capture the bride or keep the bride from exchanging hands. And the whole reason why she has this celebration, a week-long celebration, is to fool her thunder god brother, Saint Elijah, so he doesn't know when exactly his birthday is. Otherwise, he would get too excited and destroy the world with lightning and fire.
Yep.
So she's doing us a favor.
Wow.
While killing people with sledgehammers, setting fields and farms and houses on fire, and killing everyone involved, right? So that's sort of the tale. And it's interesting because it is a cautionary tale of what the weather is like and what you should be doing, right, during that season.
I just want to here's the thing about all this. I know we're going down a path, but what is so hysterical to me is somebody thought this up, wrote this down, and created this lore around this entire thing. And I feel like it's so funny because I go, okay, you know what? People keep lighting shit on fire. So this is what we're going to do.
We're just going to party this week.
Hey, no, you're not, you're saying somebody created this. No, this was just written down. This is the way it was. So
it was orally told for a long time. And then the Romans came through and said, that's Saint Elijah, that's Saint
Yeah,
Mary.
this is Saint Mary. This is
Yeah, this is the devil.
this is not the regular Roman Empire. This is the Holy Roman
The
Empire.
Holy yes,
Yeah,
yes.
not
Sorry,
not. This
correct,
is
correct.
long after our boy Jesus has now converted, the
Yes.
Roman Empire to his, because the original Roman Empire went there and went, you can't have these gods and goddesses. We're stealing them and making them our gods and goddesses. But here they did the same thing a few hundred years later, going, okay, now there are saints and
They're saints.
Wow.
Yeah. Hey, it worked for them so well too when they indoctrinated so many tribes and unified so many places that were far from that. But in short, that's the story, right? And it's cool to see these motifs of Bloody Mary with her little hammer and her little devil, and that this is inspired by Slavic tribe tales of caution during that time.
yeah.
But she was called Fiery Mary.
Fiery Mary, right?
Fire.
But
And it was supposedly, if you mention her in front of a mirror,
if you
could cause a
you would
fire,
not,
especially
do
if
not
she had
speak her name. Don't draw attention. If you see her walking in the fields, you're to turn away and walk the other way.
because she has a
There-
fiery child, and the child is a demon baby, as the wonderful Key and Peele like to talk about. 1 in 4 children in our school is a demon baby. The kids are nice, babies are evil. But that was what this was, is if you summoned the fiery baby, you were getting her, but she was bringing her fiery child, and that was what
child
caused the
the
accident.
surface with her. Yeah, she was a badass, man. And what gets me is that she's a female figure carrying around a sledgehammer of all things.
Yeah,
It
she was a total badass, and that was one of the ones when I first read about her. There was an archaeologist who had found this Christian tomb that predates Christianity, and it had basically an upside down cross. So wait a minute, all right, that's kind of odd. Predating crucifixions, predating all this stuff, and it had beware Oyenya, and it was and it was 3 times before you walked up to this crypt. It was supposedly her crypt. It was very interesting, and that was in the Carpathian Mountains, which was one of the coolest places I ever visited.
Oh,
wow.
Just rub it in with
Sadly, the Romanian communist government supposedly tore it down sometime thereafter, and I have no idea where it was, but my guide took me there way back in the 80s, and wish it was marked somewhere, but I've looked for it since and can't find any records of it.
Oh, it's crazy.
Wow.
And like I said, it's very hard to research from my chair on the other side of the computer screen too.
It was tough to research then because it was still communist Romania, and it was
a lot of my
like that
intel originally came from, there are people who talk about their grandmothers still telling these stories and instilling these rules during when they're over there for summer and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's very much still believed in. So that would be like our first Bloody Mary or aggressive or aggro Mary figure, right?
That's the first potential candidate. Yes.
Right. And then, of course, by the 1486, we're starting to get really weird Dark Ages beliefs about mirrors. If you stare into a mirror, young virgins and boys will be attracted by the witch's magic or the lull of magic. And then as shortly after this time frame is when we have Mary Tudor, who is dubbed as Bloody Mary historically, because it was part of a propaganda. It was a big propaganda thing. And a lot of people don't realize Mary Tudor, if you're not familiar with her father was Henry VIII. So she was already dealt a bad hand immediately.
That's one way of looking at it.
Well, she was from the first marriage. So before things went south.
And then, of course, Anne Boleyn was her stepmom at some point, but she had several stepmoms, apparently, obviously. But eventually she became queen.
Well, I got to go into a little history here.
Go into it.
I got to do history here. If we're going to skip ahead, we got to do some history. So anybody who doesn't want history lesson, skip ahead about 5 minutes. But just real quick, Henry VIII, I am, right? This guy, he has his first wife and has a baby, and it's a girl, but he needs a male heir, can't get a male heir. So he decides to divorce his wife, which is big no-no from the Catholic Church. And, and they were the rulers of the world at that point. So he divorces her so he can sleep with Anne Boleyn, who he's been wanting to have an affair with for some time. And honestly, she was kind of throwing herself at him if you read the documents and everything historically. Watch The Tudors on Showtime, and it was actually pretty accurate. But anyway, so Anne doesn't have any male heirs. So then he divorces her, marries Jane Seymour. Not Jane Seymour, the lovely actress from Battlestar Galactica and Live and Let Die, but the historical Jane Seymour, who is just as lovely. And he does have a son with James, but then he wants more, divorces her, or she dies in childbirth when she has the baby. And so he marries another because he's got to have more than one kid. You got to have more than one male heir. But then, he can't ever do it again. And then finally he dies. And then it goes to his son. Now, his son only lasts like 3 more years before he dies and doesn't have an heir. And that's when Mary, they decide she needs to come back. She should have been the rightful heir from the beginning, but because he divorced his first wife, she was illegitimate. But she comes back and takes over, and she decides, hey, this whole Church of England thing that Henry did and all this was wrong. We need to become Catholic again. We need to go back to Catholicism. And she starts burning Protestants.
Interestingly enough, when she was first born, at the age of 2, she was promised the Charles V.
Right.
And then later, she ends up, when she becomes queen, she ends up marrying his son, Philip. And it's when she's married to Philip that they reinstate the Catholicism, which then dubbed roughly 200 to 300 plus Protestants as heretics. And by law at that time, they had to burn at the stake.
Well, she brought back that law because she thought it was going to be like a shock and awe thing. She was like, we do a couple of these, everyone's going to be like, all right, let's convert back to Catholicism real quick. But it didn't go the way she planned. Yeah. And that's, people were like,
and
hey, this is entertaining. Let's watch people burn at the stake again. This is awesome.
Wow.
So that's how she ended up being Bloody Mary.
Yeah.
Now, there were books printed after, let's see, what was it, around 1554 when the Protestants were burnt. She went into deep depression. She had false pregnancies. She could never conceive a child, and then died of the flu, but 4 years after that. So she lived miserably for 4 more years after that incident that brought a downfall for her. The crazy thing is that books were published well into the 16th century. Like, I think it's called Fox's Book of Martyrs. And in the first edition, out of the 57 pictures, 50 of them were of Mary, doing the signal and people burning at the stake.
People burning at the stake, yeah.
So her reputation became crazier. And of course, during this time that follows it, you have more interesting mirror lores and superstitions that start to develop. For instance, in 1691, in the Athenian Mercury, which is a newspaper, they share a story about a girl, on Sundays after she hears the lectures and preaching, that she'd come home and look in the mirror and see herself as the devil, right? And this starts to kind of spiral into these creepy lores, and people are like, oh, no, if you look in the mirror with candlelight, it's bad luck. You also get stories by the 17th century that if you break the looking glass, it's bad luck. So all these mirror lores and stories are being published in newspapers and trusted sources of print. By the 17th century, most people thought of a looking glass as magicians' tools for diabolical operations or divinations, right? Like, either you were seeing the future or predicting the future, or you were seeing the devil, you were seeing the Grim Reaper, and it just keeps spiraling. But then we get Elizabeth Bathory in the 17th century.
All right. Elizabeth Bathory, I do not associate with the Bloody Mary legend, but it could be. It's one of those.
A lot of people do.
Yeah.
I don't think of her as that, but I figured honorable mentions are always welcome.
Always
welcomed.
I
She
think though, before we
inspired
get into her,
vampire lore and stuff like that for a long time. But there's two Mary Worths that also get tied into this.
all right, before we get
But
into them, we need to take a break, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So I agree. I think the Mary Worths definitely, and we can't just gloss over Elizabeth Bathory. So we will
No,
do
no,
that.
no. But as she's a more familiar name, so
Yeah.
so we will be right back, travelers. And with that, we're at the end of this, by the way, going to have some travel locations if you want to do this that don't just involve your bathroom mirror. So we will be right back.
Prepare to be devoured. The Wolves of Wharton is a 6-part complete book series by Eerie Travels producer Beau Lake. It has been called dark and visceral, steamy, dramatic, and a fresh take on the werewolf mythos. If you like action, adventure, a large serving of body horror, and some steamy relations, the Wolves of Wharton series is for you. Pick it up wherever books are sold or at linktree.com/Beau__Lake.
The sweltering heat of the Florida sun breaks as a chill runs down your spine. A dark shadow looms from a nearby tourist trap. You didn't expect to find this kind of shade in Florida. If only there was some sort of travel guide to steer you through the spookier locales. Well, you're in luck, reader. Join author Mark Muncy and Carrie Schultz as they lead you through the darkest locations in the Sunshine State in creepy Florida. Available from History Press and at fine bookstores everywhere.
So we're back,
we're
and
back.
we glossed over Elizabeth Bathory, and I cannot condone that. So
Okay. Countess Bathory, a Hungarian countess. One of my favorite stories is how she got obsessed with blood in the first place. She was known to be very cruel to her servants, and she preferred pretty young servants on top of that. So most of them were between the age of 12 and 16, I think, if I recall correctly. And she would like instill like really shitty punishments. She once had a girl frozen to death as a punishment. She had her stand in the courtyard and have the other servant girls throw water on her until she froze to death.
And now what's funny about this is supposedly
There's nothing funny about that.
so the story goes that she was bathing and one of her servants accidentally pricked herself.
Getting her hair brushed.
Yeah, yes, and
she was getting her hair
on one of
brushed.
her
She tugged on her hair and she slapped her so hard she busted her eardrum and was sprayed across the face with blood. And she noticed as she wiped it away how soft and wonderful her skin felt.
Right. Now, what's amazing to me at this time is Elizabeth Bathory. She exists at the same time as this guy in a nearby country named Vlad the Impaler, who we know as Dracula. And there is a historical blur that we don't know if it happened or not, but at one point he was visiting Hungary and was near her castle. And if there's a royalty, meeting royalty, they tended to team up and hang out at each other's castle because we don't know where he stayed for like a week in history. And it could have been her castle. And that is literally months before she goes on this crazy spree. And so did she pick up some tips from old Vlad Dracul? That was amazing to me. So
yeah, and the crazy thing about the Countess is that she started bathing in tubs of blood to keep her youthful appearance. People noted her not aging, which was kind of very disturbing. And eventually, of course, they were running out of young women at this point, I would imagine, at the rate she was going.
They said it was 60 that she killed, and that was what she was ultimately tried for.
Yeah.
which was, royalty on trial, which was never done at this time, 18th, pre-18th century, that was never done.
Yeah.
But when they found her diary, which had all the victims listed, it never was published. It was never shown, but a few of the witnesses said there were over 600 names.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy. And her castle, I went to the ruins of it. I was thinking it's like Katish Castle in Slovakia. Somebody can correct me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's where it was. And again, the ruins was just, it had been sacked in the 18th century, and so it was destroyed. But
Yeah.
that place just felt wrong. And only a few places I've ever been had that much scary.
I know that when she was punished, they bricked her into her own room with a slot to feed her through.
And that was all she was allowed, because her beauty was so great. Anybody who saw her might be charmed and let her.
Charmed, because they were afraid that she was into black magic by this point. And the crazy thing is, normally when you hear stories like this, they only survive like a year or two like that. She lived like over a decade longer.
Yeah, in the room.
Like that. It was like 12 or 14 years after being bricked up into her room.
And the only reason that she died is she stopped eating.
Which is scary. A scary notion.
You've got to think about what that must have been like. Let's jump into the smell for just a tick.
Yeah.
Shall we? Because you guys are describing this, and honestly, all my brain could think of is how thoroughly disgusting that space must have been. Just like absolutely horrific, because it's not like her defecation and stuff is going anywhere. And I would think that it was probably pretty stinky.
There's no AC.
No.
No central air.
I've heard recently that the castle is now back safe to travel to, and it reopened to the public in 2014.
Okay.
So the ruins are now, you can actually march to them and not fall off the mountain like I almost did.
No.
But in the town, there was a museum dedicated to her, because that was where she was interred until they returned her back to her hometown somewhere deeper in Hungary that I didn't get to. Because they protested. They didn't want her buried there anymore. But the town has a big statue of her. And I remember, I had just gone to Dracula's castle, a few weeks before that. And it was like, oh my gosh, what a whirlwind tour. Crazy stuff. But anyway, I don't know if she's Bloody Mary, because it doesn't fit the legend. So
the legend, right.
Bloody Countess.
Right. She's a countess, and it just seems weird, but she gets brought up a lot when you do the research. And it's probably because of her obsession with blood, right? And she inspired vampire lore. She inspired Carmilla and a few other pieces that you should definitely check out and read.
And definitely watch Countess Dracula from the Hammer films. Indrid Pitt. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
So what I found interesting is then you jump to a more recent Mary that's tied to these that have a little bit more connection. And it's both women are by the name of Mary Worth. And some of the traditions, whether you're saying the name 3 times or 13 times, it's Bloody Mary, Hail Mary, Mary Worth. If you're in Japan, it's Hanukkah-san. I believe in Mary Worth is also a phrasing that comes up in the different, depending where you pick up on your Bloody Mary urban legend from, right? And how it's handed down to you. It's almost like it's a game or tradition. You can even find a how-to, and it's freaking hilarious. There is a wiki how on how to play Bloody Mary, and it has some of the best graphics. Almost like you're on the plane and you're looking at the graphics on how to do stuff. It looks identical to that. Yes. And it cracks me up all the time. And I'll be sure to share that link with everyone. But in short, we have the first Mary Worth is very, very similar story. We've seen it several times in different areas. It's a common legend. In fact, the Witch of Hog Island is very much like this. She was a herbalist who lived isolated out to the side. Small girls start going missing in the village, and she's to blame because they believe she's using them in the magical arts. Now,
wow,
the crazier one happens during the Underground Railroads. Mary Worth was a woman who was intersecting runaway slaves. And she was actually selling them back to their masters or to the highest bidder, is what she was doing.
Yeah,
She was
reverse
making
Underground
Ugh.
Railroad.
it
Yeah.
was a reverse railroad, right? Which is terrible. But I guess her town did not approve of this. So, under the guise of calling her a witch and accusing her of killing slaves and using them in her dark arts, they burnt her on a stake on her own property. Now, this is where history starts to muddle and twist this tale. I know that that's how she died, and that's been confirmed because luckily the last surviving eyewitness to her death, and who was in her 90s, was interviewed by, I think, Chicago Tribune or one of the Chicago papers way back when, as a Halloween special on Bloody Mary. And there's confusion whether she was a Wadesworth, Illinois farmsteader is what she was. And now where she was buried in the old St. Patrick's Cemetery, or she's buried under the boulder that marks where Mill Creek Road is. So but strangely enough, those are near the same place, which is
Very
kind of
close.
questionable.
Very
Yeah.
Very, like, there are ghost tours that go through Wadesworth that take you to these places. You can find plenty of bloggers who've taken photos or share their encounters. One encounter includes them having a spirit box going, and they ask if Mary Worth is here. And they said a female's voice came across saying, "I believe in Mary Worth" 3 times, which is kind of like, yeah. And I'll share the link to that blog so people can see that person's story firsthand. They asked her, "Do you have the ability to visit people in their dreams?" And she goes, "Yes." And then another person asked, "Should we stay to ask more questions or should we leave now?" And a male voice said, "Run." And they said the whole troop just scrambled over each other to get back on the tour bus. They were done at that point.
Wow.
And again, I'll share that link so you guys can do it. But that was in the old cemetery there, St. Patrick's, on a ghost tour. So there's a really cool place that you can visit to this day and participate in part of that, where people have had scary Bloody Mary encounters, so to speak, in that aspect. Now, the interesting thing is when things get muddled, there are stories that she was tossed into the Devil's Pool, which I guess is in North Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why? Like, did someone over there was like, "No, you know what, I've heard this Bloody Mary chick just got burnt at the stake, let's pretend that they threw her down our tourist attraction." You get that stuff a lot. But it's interesting because during all of this dark history and the Marys and stuff, you also had the lures behind breaking mirrors, looking in mirrors, and looking in mirrors with candlelight, twisting, the superstitions getting almost redefined by the decade. We are now seeing articles in Newcastle News where, when you look into a mirror by candlelight, you're going to see another person's face, or the devil's face, or the reaper's face. Or on the positive side, later in the 20th century, they try to spin it as a fun Halloween to do, and you can see your future husband's face. And I'm like, dude, you tried, but I don't think you can turn the bull's horn. It's done. It's out in the pasture by this point, by hundreds of years of, ill luck. If your mirror cracks from side to side, you're cursed, and there's no way to undo it. In the 1980s, you start getting new variants where you take a cracked mirror, you put it in a bag and bury it in your garden to kind of save yourself from 7 years of bad luck. The first variant of 7 years of bad luck started in the 1850s and is believed to be tied with fairy faith. So now we got fairies involved. Like,
Oh,
it's
God.
crazy.
And that's one of the things with mirrors. Usually early days, they were backed with either silver paint or other paints. And so that also gets into that lore. That's why the whole mirror summoning and stuff.
Early looking glasses were actually painted with mercury, and many
Mercury.
kids died licking mercury off the mirrors.
Yeah.
There are grim fairy tales and poor Charlotte tales that talk about in songs that talk about don't lick the mirror, or little Johnny is 10 feet, 6 feet under, things like that. You also have to remember that the mirror was also a tool. So during a time where medically we were behind, during all these times, the mirror was used as a means to check if they still were breathing. So you can imagine that someone looking dead, putting the mirror up to their nose and seeing the condensation and be like, this dead person's breathing is what they're thinking, right? So there's a big crazy association that possibly the mirrors were stealing souls at one point, because they would check them and the next day they'd be dead, and then they would believe the mirror, there was something wrong with the mirror because it was supposed to be a life-saving tool, so they wouldn't bury them too soon, so to speak.
So I got a question. So this comes back. I mean, there's so much stuff and so much horrible lore, as we always say, Mark, like the truth is so much more horrific than the fiction, right?
Truth hiding there somewhere. Yeah.
But when did this thing with children start about throwing the water on the mirror? Like, do we have when that actually began?
That's one I didn't come across, and I looked and looked and looked for. I know that in 1855, there was a report that depending who broke the mirror or what broke the mirror, you were going to lose one of those in your household or estate within the year. So if a cat broke a mirror, you're going to lose a house cat by the end of the year. If a child broke it, a child would die before the end of the year.
That's breaking the mirror. I'm talking about because when I was a kid, you said Bloody Mary 3 times to a mirror, but I think you had to throw water on it as well. Like you turned out the lights and you threw water on it.
The one I grew up with is you had to have 2 candles burning, and somebody had to blow out the candles right as you finished. So you had to have a partner with you. Yeah,
that sounds like a lot of effort. So I don't know about that.
Yeah, mine was a single. Actually, I have a story. I have a story of when I accidentally freaked out my cousin. As a confession, I've never shared this fucking story.
Oh, great!
God,
those are my favorite stories.
I think I had to be between the age of 9 and 12. We were playing out in the woods. So they lived in like a double wide trailer or something, and then there was like a field of tall grass that was almost taller than we were. And then there was woods, and the woods were really dark compared to everywhere else. And we had lost track of time. It started getting dark, and we got scared trying to run across that huge field, like corn stalks, right? Cornfields are scary. So it was equivalent to that for us little children. And we ran across. So we had already been sort of spooked. And I had learned the Bloody Mary thing from the babysitter. From the babysitter, as one does. But I hadn't really grasped it, so I totally flew by the seat of my pants, and I was like, you have to say Bloody Mary 3 times in front of the mirror. And I start telling this story, and I don't even remember how the story twisted or what I told her, but basically by the end of the story, I had managed to get her to say Bloody Mary 3 times while sitting in front of the mirror, the little sister, my little cousin. And then I blew out the candle. Fucking dick. She immediately got a nosebleed.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Which added to the hysteria, and we all started freaking out. And I just kept saying, no, I made it up. Like, seriously, this is made up. It's an urban legend. It's not real. Like, I at least understood that much because I was at least a well-read kid. I don't know. It took us days to get my cousin to level out. But the fact that she started a nosebleed, I don't know if it's because I startled her to the point of giving her an aneurysm. Don't know. But it's crazy because we grow up with this being handed down to us with no sense of the historical inspiration that started it in the first place, which is what I find fascinating.
I agree. I think all of us at Eerie Travels, I know Mark's on here, I know Beau's behind the scenes being brilliant, but I think every single one of us probably has done the Bloody Mary thing for whatever degree it is. What I'm curious for our travelers, though, out there are what are their Bloody Mary stories, right?
Right.
Because it's interesting to hear the different. So, first of all, you were not supposed to, in the one that I was raised with, which I was mainly raised out in California. So that's where I got my Bloody Mary story. You were not supposed to have anyone else in the bathroom with you. It was supposed to be by itself. You go in, you close the door, you splash the mirror, I think, with water and shut off the lights and say, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary 3 times. And then she appears in the mirror. And when I said that, Garrus appeared, my puppy.
Yeah,
so
that was
that worked out
perfect.
well.
I remember the one was
You wanna tell
Bloody
me,
Mary,
Garrus?
Bloody Mary, I killed your baby. Or I also remember the I believe in Mary Worth. You had to say that 3 times.
Yeah, I believe
That
in
was
Mary
one.
Worth.
Back to Mary Worth. I remember there was one in Ohio named Black Agnes. And it was I believe in Black Agnes a few times. So she was another Bloody Mary variant. And of course, the classic in the 60s and 70s is I believe in Mary Jane. But and
Wow.
that would summon some things, and you would see some things in the mirror. But we heard Mary Worth, Mary Worthington, Mary Wales, Mary Johnson. These were also some of the names of the Salem witch characters of history. And then, of course, Hail Mary was one I had heard was, say Hail Mary 3 times, which was take on the Hail Marys.
The Hail Mary.
And then, so she either drives them mad, drives them dead, scratches your face.
Scratches you, strangles you, sucks your blood, or so you can imagine it totally freaked us out when she suddenly had a nosebleed.
Yeah.
Oh,
what happened? Yeah.
What have I done? I've summoned a demon unknowingly.
I'm just going to throw out here's the Erika comment of the day. This seems like Mary was the Karen of history.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. I know the babysitter said you either a hand mirror or a wall mirror. It didn't matter. You would sit in a dark room with a candle. You would say her name, blow out the candle, and then look in the mirror again. And she would appear or something would appear. And of course, there's tons of legends of, like I said, either your future husband or the Grim Reaper. Who knows? Maybe they're one and the same. But
for some people, I think they would say that. Yes.
They would say that.
Yeah.
Okay, so my little Oxford book of superstition says mirrors in water. 1697 is the first thing they found in antiquities of Greece. In ancient Greece, dipping a looking glass into water or splashing it with water was to answer the desire to know whether someone would become sick. So if you looked well or ill in the glass, accordingly, you could presume what your future condition would be.
Mirrors for for her prophecies and stuff too. So
yeah. And then in 1912, Herefordshire published in volume 87, it is held unlucky to place a mirror or splash a mirror with water. Yeah. So it goes back to trying to make a bad situation worse, which is what the candle in front of it is also a meaning of, right? Which is interesting.
I remember you had to cover mirrors in the house when somebody died because otherwise the spirit would get stuck in a mirror. That's a common occurrence, and other things. You shouldn't sleep in a room with mirrors, supposedly, particularly here in the Appalachians. And I covered our mirrors in our room. I only bring them out when I need to take a look at myself. But wasn't there, I know we had the movie Urban Legend, of course, Candyman uses
Candyman. That's I was going to mention Candyman. It's a fun one and a variant of Bloody Mary. I know in Japan, it's Hanako-san. You go into a school bathroom. It's a school tradition, right? Or urban legend. And it's Hanako died or drowned in the toilet kind of vibe or something, or was bullied and beaten to death in the bathroom. There's so wide variety. So imagine a ghostly figure that is on point with the ring, right? That's Hanako-san. When she comes out of the toilet or the mirror, that's what she looks like. The girl who comes out of the TV, right? And you either sit in a stall and do it in front of the water of the toilet, right? With a mirror and a candle or a flashlight. And you call Hanako-san, Hanako-san, Hanako-san. And she she's supposed to appear. And it's also interesting to say that through everyone's retelling, there are more saying that she's a malicious figure, but others say that in some instances she's benign and she will foretell if there's going to be a death of your best friend or the death of a family member. In some cases. So now you're crossing into the realm of what I call like a banshee, right? You hear the banshees cry, there's going to be a death in your immediate family on the fourth night or something like that, which I thought was an interesting twist. And of course, as you guys know, I write as Honey Cummings, and I did I did Beating It with Bloody Mary, and I sort of mixed it with Arthurian tale with the fact that Vivian, who was Merlin's mistress, loved to use mirrors to travel through and some of the tales. And that's how she sucked Merlin into her tower and trapped him a little bit. And then he figured out he could communicate with one of the knights in the Mabagoan who was turned into a dwarf and down on himself in the forest. And he's like, hey, I need to get a message to Arthur, like, pick yourself off the fucking ground and let him know the blah. So it's always interesting to see how often in our folklores and folk tales you see a little bit of that influence coming through during the time all these other things and beliefs and superstitions are happening.
I want to say, was it 96? There was a bunch of or another rise of satanic supposedly related killings among teenagers and stuff. And it was to the point where the X-Files even did an episode about it. And I think they even had a Bloody Mary bit at the beginning. I want to say around probably like season 2 or 3. And I remember it was the one that had like the weird names like SYZ something. I don't remember. I'll have to look that one up. That'll be in the notes, gang. But I remember that episode with a satanic cult, but it was teenage kids and doing the Bloody Mary gang, rivals for a boy, and then there's screams and blood, and and that's how the show started. And I remember I was like, oh man, they're gonna do Bloody Mary, and it went into a whole different direction. But that's what happens with these. There it is. Yeah. Thank you, Beau. So
yeah, Charmed had an episode, Ghost Whisperers had an episode, Supernatural. There's
and of course the movie Urban Legend.
South Park even had an episode with
Biggie Smalls.
With me, yes.
Biggie Smalls, say Biggie Smalls 3 times, he'll show up. Yep.
Yeah.
Fiery Mary was the one. I still think it kind of dates back to Fiery Mary, and that seems to be the one with the actual lore, and then summoning the baby, summoning the fire baby, and all that. And I think it just switched to Bloody Mary in Europe because they Anglicanized it when it got to Europe, and then when it came to America, it just stuck with us in the Appalachians and all that. And that's
couple Rotten Marys or Scary Marys, and like Erika said, it became the Karen.
Mary Worth, I think, got kind of morphed into that as well. It's fun to watch how these things travel.
She's also a villain you have to face in Dishonored in The Wolf Among Us, and she's featured in the comics Fabled.
Both great.
So those are good times too. But it's great to see that we're making them stay alive in a weird way. And they become sort of a pop culture thing or a tradition more than a scary story these days, I think.
Yeah.
But I would like you.
What was it? The psychologists call it the Robinson age, when you're like 9 to 13. And that's when you want to do something to prove that there's more to this world than there is. And that's when you're more susceptible to doing these things like Bloody Mary rituals or, whatever else you might want to try. But I think some of us just never grow out of that. And that's why we're here where we do. And we're Eerie travelers.
Yes.
Love it.
Okay. So we've got to wrap up. So Val, it is amazing as always having you on the podcast. Thank you so much for coming on and bringing us this very creepy thing. So travelers out there, I know Mark is going to wrap us up. So do not forget, we will share some links with all the places that you can visit and go see and be completely thoroughly creeped out. Now, if you're, having a lazy kind of day with maybe some Oreos and some chocolate milk, one of my favorite lazy kind of days, you can go to your own bathroom and splash some water, maybe use some candles. Apparently in Mark's version, you can bring a friend. And so if you really want to, you can summon the Karen of medieval times.
You can also go to paranormalitymagazine.com and vote for us for your top 10 paranormal podcasts. And if you order a book there, because this month the cover happens to have a guy who looks a lot like me on it and happens to spell his name exactly the same as me. Oh, wait, it is me. But, you know, if you get that issue, you use the code TRAVELS, you get 10% off, and then you can read about me. But you can also go to eerietravels.com. Tell us your Bloody Mary stories. What was the legend you know? Do you know Black Agnes? Do you know Mary Worth? What was your version? And what happened when you said it? And we'd also love, you know, we'll forward any of that on to Val because she's, you know, Miss Researcher for these things. Also, send us your favorite Bloody Mary recipe because Erika would be very interested in that. I just remember it was like tomato juice, vodka, and hot pepper sauce, and just garnish it with whatever you felt like. So that way you felt like you were doing something healthy with a celery stick. But anyway.
Listen, you can put bacon and celery in those, so
There
I'm
you
good to go.
See, I didn't know that. I know somebody was telling me Worcestershire sauce, but I could never do Worcestershire sauce because I'm allergic to garlic and onions, just like my grandpa Vlad the Impaler. Yeah, I brought it back around to that. But I would recommend, you know, going. There's so many places you can go. Bathory's Castle is apparently back open in Slovakia, and it's like a 45-minute hike. If I recall, it was about an hour and a half when I did it, so a lot better now, and it's a lot safer now. You can go to Dracula's Castle now in Romania. That's also awesome. You can go visit some of the, you know, Salem and go visit the witch trials locations. And you can even now Mary Worth is one of those. We don't know if she really existed or not. So it's one of those oddball characters from history. So yeah, there are places that claim to be her resting place. We don't know. But with all that said, gang, thank you so much as always. Continue to share and like and subscribe. And we'll see you on the Discord. We'll see you on all the other channels here. And with that, gang, I will just say, remember when you're staring into that mirror and that face is looking back at you and you dare say the same thing 3 times, and you don't know what's going to happen. One thing that will happen is that we will see you on the other side.